Hi, everyone. You're listening to Buck Talk, a podcast created by members of the entomology department at Michigan State University. In today's podcast, we're going to meet Jaree Johnson. Hi, Jaree.
Hi everyone.
Welcome to the podcast. And today I'm not alone. For those of you following on YouTube, you can see my co hosts. But for those that are listening, could you please introduce yourselves? Let's start with Andrea. Andrea, you're on mute. Okay, we still can't hear you, Andrea, so I'm going to go to Jen.
Hey, it's Jen.
And Olivia, they want to say hello?
Hi, it's Olivia.
And this is Olivia's first participation in a podcast, so welcome, Olivia.
Thank you.
All right, Andrea, do you want to say again to say hello? Okay, we can't hear you, so hopefully you can fix that little glitch on your end, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you that are in the department, you might have seen Jaree's departmental seminar a few weeks ago, I think it was, right, Jaree?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun to see that you talked about military careers and how you are faring in the military. And so we really don't want to like repeat a lot of that information here, but we do want to talk some about things that are related to your career and life in general. So we're going to ask you about that. So to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit more about where you're from, where you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for having me. So I rise from Gary, Indiana. So I am a Midwestern uh, woman. And, especially right now with the snow happening in the US, although I'm in Kenya, I do miss it a little bit. So seeing it has been definitely heartfelt. But I'm from Gary, Indiana, and I am the oldest of three. I have two younger brothers. I hail from a family that were migrated up from Arkansas and also were laborers in the steel industry in that area. And throughout my educational career, if you will, I've always been uh, the one child that was the most adventurous, I would say, especially during times walking to and from school, especially coming home. I would always have stuff in my pockets or in my bags, and I would bring, random critters, lizards, snakes, name it. I brought everything home, and I've always been a fan of having animals. We grew up having at least dogs. That was something that my parents were comfortable with. But for me, I needed more. And I think that was really the beginning of my interest, if you will, in critters, all critters. And also growing up, my father and my grandfathers and uncles, they would take me fishing, we would go camping. And so I was able to get a little bit more nature exposure as well. But as I got into high school, I was able to finish my high school education 2 years earlier than the rest of my peers, but my mom was not ready for me to graduate at such a young age. So she had me take up a career trade, which we call, I think it's called career school now. They've changed the name of it, but it's a trade where you go to school half a day and then you take a trade the other half of the day. And so my parents put me in nursing, although remember, I like critters. I didn't want to deal with people like that. And so for 2 years, I was able to acquire a certified nursing assistant certificate, just to fill in the gap while in high school. And then I graduated on time, what was relative to what my mother was comfortable with. And from there, I actually went to Prairie View A&M University in Texas, and my major was nursing because again, that's the direction my mom was leading me in. Being the first person to go to college in my immediate family, they were also looking at, okay, how can you continue to land a job? How can you be successful post college? But I realized my sophomore year in undergrad, I was not happy. Being a nursing major was just not really my calling. But I also didn't know that we had an animal science program at my institution. And I was part of an organization, a collegiate organization. One of my sisters that was in this particular organization, heard me talking about, oh, how I wish there was at least some type of animal science program or something where I can interact with wildlife. And she told me, oh, we have an agriculture program. Now, mind you, I'm at Prairie View A&M University. The A is for agriculture. But again, I didn't have mentors and I didn't have the know-how to ask these questions. I just went with what was provided with me, for me. And so she introduced me. She was an agriculture economics major, and she introduced me to the dean and the department head and one of the major professors. And I instantly changed my major from nursing to animal science. From there, my grades skyrocketed. I mean, I went from being, a high C to low B student to honor roll. I graduated with honors and I just enjoyed it. Although it was a husbandry degree, it was hands-on, it was interactive, and that's what I really thrive in, from herding cow to doing castrations to immunizations. And I also worked part-time as a veterinary technician for livestock. So I was acquiring that skill set. But I realized I did jump a little bit really fast. While in high school, the second year, my senior year, my mom realized I still did not like nursing. So she was able to get the teachers to agree that I can spend some time at a veterinarian hospital instead of doing full on nursing. So I did a little bit of nursing, and then I also did the veterinarian rotation, but still ended up with the CNA certificate. So fast forwarding, you know, being a veterinary technician for livestock, and it just blossomed for there. So I wanted to be a veterinarian, honestly. And being an animal science major does not afford you the opportunity to have pre-vet courses. For example, 2 semesters of physics, 2 semesters of inorganic, organic, some of these other things. I was able to get 1 semester of all of these. And so I had to make the decision to continue to try to take those courses and hope that I can then apply for veterinarian school or pursue a master's degree in animal health and diseases, which is what I did. And so I was accepted into the University of Rhode Island in the animal health and diseases program, where I looked at Lyme disease. I was working, that was my first time really putting the two together, the animal model, and now we have this 8-legged animal model, ticks, and how the interaction really came together and how Lyme disease was very rampant. And that was my segue, I would say, into the connection of vector-borne diseases and the veterinarian entomology side of it. Well, during this time, they also needed students to assist with West Nile virus surveillance. West Nile was new to the East Coast. This was in 2000. And I signed up for it. I said, hey, sign me up. Any additional things I can do, I would love to do that. And so I spent the summer working for Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management doing mosquito surveillance all throughout the little tiny state of Rhode Island. And luckily, or not so luckily, my site was actually the first site to get dead bird, and also not dead birds, to have the first site to have positive mosquitoes in my collection. So the news crew came out. I mean, it was huge. And I was so excited. I was like, this is happening on my watch. But I loved it. I mean, the interaction and the hands-on, and just the fact that these small organisms, ticks and mosquitoes, can cause such a huge impact. And common people don't think about that. Growing up, I never thought about it. But, one thing I do think about that's related, whenever we would feast at my grandmother's house, she would always say at the end, oh my goodness, I am as full as a tick. And I never put 2 and 2 together. And so like that saying always went with me, I'm as full as a tick. She was literally breeding me to be an entomologist, and I just didn't know it. And so when I started working with ticks and learned how they became engorged, and we saw ticks growing up, but again, we didn't think about it because all of the old wise tales, you pull them off, pluck them, you just didn't think about the implications of the diseases they transmitted. And so that stuck with me. And so graduated from University of Rhode Island, took a job with Clark Mosquito Control in Illinois. I moved back to Indiana. At that time, my grandmother was going through a bilateral knee replacement. She was also going through chemotherapy for breast cancer. So I moved back home to be there with her, started working for Clark Mosquito Control, furthering my interest in mosquito control. Plus, they were at the point of developing a new environmentally friendly product, which is now on the market, has been EPA approved, Carnatular. So 4 of those 6 products I was able to help develop between Roselle, Illinois, Schaumburg, Illinois, and then they would send us to Kissimmee, Florida when it was wintertime in Illinois. So I was back and forth doing these efficacy studies. And so I was learning so much, and it was always outdoors. And I just had the best time of my life. And they said, hey, you should go back to school and actually get a entomology degree. And the connection between Clark Mosquito Control, Ned Walker put together, drove up to East Lansing, talked to Ned, explained to him what my interests were, and did the application process. Clark Mosquito Control also supported and funded my education, along with other fellowships that I had received, graduate fellowships that I had received. And next thing I know, I was admitted into the program. So fast forwarding a little bit there, I get to MSU, and there's a small change. At this time, Dr. Richard Merritt is the department chair, and they had a understanding of, hey, we'll have you also do some aquatic work while Ned can also be the co-chair on the committee. And from there, obviously trying to develop my research project, we were able to coordinate with Saginaw Mosquito Control, looking at the different biological succession and competition, if you will, in catch basins. And the theory behind that was to help alert when they should actually do treatment. When does spring mosquitoes show up? When does the summer mosquitoes show up, from westerns to Pythians? Where should they treat? Is the catch basins that are more organic the ones that are breeding the most, and et cetera? And so that was the characterization research that I was able to do. Again, constantly building my portfolio and skill set, if you will. Graduated from MSU with a second master's, went back to working for Clark Mosquito Control. And actually, I should back up. I was the guest president while at MSU for, I want to say, 2 years. And so during that time, they had a hometown recruiting program, which this is one of my shirts that I designed when I was the guest president. But during that time, the recruiters mentioned that they were doing hometown recruiting, and Rich called me and said, hey, get all the undergrad students, get the grad students together. The Army's paying for pizza. We're students, so we'll take free pizza. We just have to hear about what they do as entomologists in the Army. So I gather all the students, and we meet, in the conference area. And at this time, she was Major Jamie Blow, who's also an alumni of Michigan State University. She's now retired colonel. She was telling us about, opportunities, and we were all mind blown, like we did not know this exists. Me not coming from a military family, the only thing I knew of were gunfighting, what you see on MASH, some of those arbitrary things, but you don't think about the support elements behind the scenes, keeping the warfighter safe. So I had my introduction of what entomology is for the Army. And now fast forwarding, graduated from MSU, working at Clark Mosquito Control, and I'm pipetting, and I'm doing, I'm adding my pesticides to the thorax. I'm having to be really quick because I have them knocked down and I got to put them in the cups. She walks in. She's looking at some of the work we're doing for the uniform that we currently wear that's now treated, and the collaboration that the Army had with Clark. And I said, this must be a sign. And she said, I remember you. And I was like, I remember you. And she gave me her information. She gave me recruiter information. And so as I'm still, enjoying my work at Clark, I also know that I'm a wanderlust, if you will. I like being challenged. I love traveling. And I just like knowing about everything. And so the military was an option for me to travel, be a wanderlust, and have to know about everything. Although my formal research was in mosquitoes and ticks. For the military, I have to be a specialist in everything: bed bugs, biting flies, stored product pests, and the animal side, birds and snakes and things that can affect the military mission. So for me, this was perfect. I get to do animals, insects, travel the world. So I did reach out to the recruiter, and they flew me in. They had me interview with a couple of active duty entomologists so that I could really understand, outside of the hometown recruiting spiel that we give, what's really happening if I was to join. And that was that was September of 2008. I got a phone call December of 2008 where they say your packet has been accepted. I swore in and I started what we call Officer Basic School and Course, which is a 9-week indoctrination of how to be an officer, especially on the medical side. We don't do real field or any of those type of things. And 12 years later, here I am, traveling the world, loving life. And so that's, long story short, that's really how I got to this point.
That's really interesting. I don't think they have those hometown recruitments anymore, at least not that I'm aware of. Do you know
We
if
still
those
do
are
them.
okay?
Yeah, no, we still do them. Eric Foster, I had connected
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know.
before coming to Kenya. They had a Michigan quote that they needed to fill, but it was for the reserves. And he's reserved, so I did connect him, but it sounds like maybe it never happened with the department. But we still do hometown recruiting.
Cool. Andrea, I don't know if you fixed your audio issue, but let's go ahead and try. It sounds like we're still having problems. All right, I'm gonna go to Jen. Jen?
I think your journey sounds amazing. I think it's amazing how you kind of weaved in and out between, the medical side and then the animal side and then the entomology. And then you ended up going, to a job where you got to incorporate all of those things. That's awesome. I'd like to hear more about, you said you do lots of different things at your job, like you work with animals and insects. Could you tell us a little bit more about like what exactly you do day to day?
Absolutely. And so with the military, every assignment is different. And over the 12 years, I've had the opportunity to be responsible for all of the Asian Pacific area when I was stationed in Japan. So that would entail going to different installations and looking at their pest control, also characterizing stray animals, collecting some stray animals and collecting their ectoparasites, ticks, chiggers, fleas, things of that nature, because they all have a role. They all transmit some sort of disease that affects the warfighter. So that's where the animal component comes in. And then I've also teach the Department of Defense pesticide applicators course. That was another thing that I did while stationed in Japan. And that is a certification that we have to have being in the military, because we are oftentimes asked to help do spray efforts or support for installation, DPW, Department of Public Works pest control shop. Also, where I am here in Kenya, we do research. It is a research institution. And so we receive grants from different sponsors, whether it's a sponsor that is interested in military specific research, or a university that would like to collaborate with the military for different pesticide products or spatial repellents. We even work with corporations that also may want us to look at some type of personal protective kit and analyze it on the species for that particular country. And we also look at insecticide resistance, which is now a huge thing in the military, especially because, as I mentioned, we do get asked to help do mitigation control. And with us only being able to use 2 classes of pesticides, pyrethroids and organophosphates, we have to really be innovative in how to alternate and how to change our mitigation strategies. But we also need to know if the things and the tools and the pesticide that we're using is effective. And so insecticide resistance is really huge for the military. We're starting to look at that a lot. And teaching is another opportunity, which I have not done in the military so far, except the DoD pesticide applicators course. But we do have a course that's a little bit more detailed, that's 6 weeks long, and it literally takes you through how to be a preventive medicine officer. That's another course that we have to do when we enter, and it adds on to what you are specialized in, and it teaches you how to do air control, or air sampling, sorry, and water sampling and soil sampling, and put the picture all the way together so that we can help make determinations about, the environment, especially if we're training there, or if we're going to be there for a long time in some of the current conflicts overseas. And so those have been some of the things that I've done so far pertaining to animals and insects.
Yeah, that's really cool. Olivia, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I think, again, it's really interesting kind of the variety that you have within your job, and also that you've had over your career working in industry, going to grad school. You mentioned that you don't come from a military background, and I think a lot of people don't have an interaction with, especially the kind of non-combat careers. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about misconceptions you had or common misconceptions that people have about careers in the military.
Yes, absolutely. Because I was a proponent of it, and so as I mentioned, my only knowledge was what I saw on MASH or a little bit of TV where it was war. You know, someone shooting. They are the SEALs or the Rangers, and they're doing all these high, fancy opticals, if you will. So that's what I knew of the military. When it came to joining and actually learning more about the background, the medical side. So we have an entire Army medical department, and that's housed with physicians, nurses, um, pediatricians, dentists, entomologists, environmental scientists. The list goes on and on. We are literally the support element behind the scenes. And there is a misconception where we, being the medical side, the hardcore military personnel would say, oh, you're not real military, but we are when you need us when you have Lyme disease. Oh, but we are when you need us when you have giardia or some type of gastrointestinal issue. So that's one of the misconceptions, even for those in the military. Half of them don't know that we exist. Even when we give a brief before they go out into the field, hey, you should wear your uniform properly. You should put on repellents because you will be exposed to whatever, you know. And so even within the military community, there's still a little bit of a misconception. But on the civilian side, I will tell you, when I decided to join the military as a career, my mom had these same heartburns, if you will. She just did not know what her daughter was getting into, her only daughter. What is she signing up for? And your first assignment is Japan. So now I'm miles away over the ocean from being home. Now, even though I went to Texas for undergrad, I went to Rhode Island for graduate school, I went to Michigan for graduate school, that was still close enough for her to reach me. But now I'm going across the ocean, 12, 13-hour flight away. And so once she realized that I was actually doing my profession and what I went to school for, she really relaxed. My family actually relaxed as well, because everyone, even while at Michigan State, they were like, are you sure you want to go do the military? Now, this is not the entomology folks. These are like my friends that's outside the department. Are you sure you want to go to the military? They're going to have you shooting. You're going to do this. You're going to travel here. You're going to be at war. I heard all of those things. And so I will say, through social media, it has really allowed those friends that I still talk to, has allowed my family to see my journey. And they all tell me, oh, you should write a book, because I never look like I'm in the military, apparently. They say, oh, you're just on one big joyous vacation, because I'm doing what I enjoy. This is what I was formerly trained to do. And so I don't fit actually the typical military profile, if you will. You know, if you follow me on social media, most of it is, I love foods, I love champagne, I love traveling, and I love bugs and animals. And so that's how I think some of the misconceptions that I had was diffused, and I think how it helped ease my family and my friends' misconception about it as well.
I kind of want to ask you a little bit more about immersing yourself in different cultures. It was one of the life goals that you had, to live in other countries and travel. And I know during the seminar you mentioned that you have translators usually, or people that are working with you when you're on the job. But if you could talk a little bit about living in another country and what it's like for you to interact with the locals if you don't speak the language. I mean, in Kenya, I think it's pretty easy to get around with English, but Japan is another case, I think. So how is it for you to adjust to these different cultures?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, going back to me being a very fearless, adventurous person, I take the challenges. I love being challenged. And so while living in Japan, I was fortunate enough to live on the economy. I had a house on the economy, which meant I had to drive through traffic. I had to learn how to take public transportation. I had to learn how to eat at different restaurants. Japan was great, especially being my first time in Asia, where all of their restaurants have a replicate in plastic of the food that you want to order. So I initially learned how to point. I want that, I want this, I want that. And whenever I had, my Japanese counterpart with me, he would help translate. And so I slowly started picking up survival Japanese, as I called it, the language. But Japan was really easy in terms of maneuvering because they tried to make it as friendly for the West as possible. Even taking the trains, instead of having to read katakana or hiragana, they had romanji, which is at least an alphabet. So then I could phonetically sound it out, knowing, oh, I need to go to this train station, or I need to get off at this stop. They have maps everywhere. And so that part was really easy for me. But the thing that I was the most amazed at was the culture. Just being able to travel and see their historical culture. I was able to go to Hiroshima as a staff ride with the military, just so we can see the history of how we came to be during that war conflict, but also taking personal trips. I climbed Mount Fuji my last year there, and the people are amazing in terms of welcoming. You can walk in McDonald's and they go, "Harashimasei," which is welcome. I mean, with a huge smile. And I just want a small burger and some, chicken nuggets. And so, regardless to where you walked in, you were always greeted with so much warmth. I also learned the appreciation of how the culture looks out for each other, within their own families, within their caste system, if you will. And they, even if it was a front, which you would hear some of those stories where they would smile because they are just polite people, you just never felt anything other than love being in that country. And it was amazingly clean. You leave with your trash, you bring your trash back with you. They don't have a lot of garbage cans everywhere. You have a hand towel to, dry your hands when you use a public restroom. But it was amazing. I did not get as versed in Japanese as I would have liked, but I was enjoying Japan. I traveled all throughout Japan, even some of their outer islands. I had the opportunity to travel to other countries within Asia on my leave. And so just that entire Eastern Asia experience was just amazing for me. And I love to eat. I love sushi. I went to Japan already loving sushi. And so I ate sushi every day for lunch. They have something called kaiten sushi, which is the rotary sushi. And so you go in, you sit, you get your miso soup, you get your green tea, it's a little spigot at your table, and the sushi's coming around a conveyor belt. And you just grab what you want. And I would always leave with stacks of plates, stacks of plates. And they would always just say, "Oh, Gaijin, all your plates, all your plates." And Gaijin being American. And so, I mean, it was just amazing for me being a foodie and loving people and the culture. So Japan was amazing. My other overseas assignment was Korea, being stationed there. Totally night and day. Sushi, not so much. They do bibimbap, which is a little bit different. I wasn't a fan of it. But beef and leaf was a thing. You would cook your beef on the table, wrap it in some type of lettuce leaf, add a garlic paste to it, some other fresh veggies, drink soju. So it was like night and day. People also very friendly, but a little bit more Western. Drive on the same side of the street that we do, whereas Japan, we drove on the opposite side of the street. And in terms of, getting around the system, or the transportation system, I would say was comparable. They also use Romanji, where it's phonetic, where you can phonetically sound things out. You can walk anywhere. I mean, both countries, and just all my travels in Eastern Asia was just amazing. I got a chance to go to Thailand and Cambodia, the Philippines, Singapore, Australia. I mean, so many places. And it was amazing for me, one, to see how other people live, because if you've never traveled outside of the United States, or maybe Mexico, or maybe, South America, you don't know what you don't know. And so for me, it opened my eyes to really appreciate what I have, appreciate what I don't have, and then to also be, I think, an extra human to different people that I encounter, because everyone's struggle is different, and everyone is typically making do, even with a smile on their face. And so I learned that in Japan, hey, even when things are a little bit crazy, you still smile, but you just don't mask it. You try to push through it as well, and just be a little bit more genuine to yourself. And so I think those experiences definitely opened up my human side even more. I was always a great human, but it just really made my heart a little bit bigger. And then, of course, being here in Kenya, now I'm on an entirely different continent. I mean, it's just been amazing, food here, people, and as you mentioned, they speak English here, even though Swahili and some of their tribal dialects are their other languages. but people are just so welcoming. And when I arrived, funny story, my cousin literally texted me and said, I want to see the huts. I said, what are you talking about? I want to see the huts in Africa. I'm just like, okay, so there are houses here, so you don't get to see a lot of these things except what they show you on TV. And so when you're actually here on ground, it's different. And not to say that there's not poverty in a lot of the places that I've been to, but I will say if you're not a big TV watcher or you're not really looking at shows like National Geographic or some of these shows that will really put their foot in some of these countries, you won't know how life really exists outside of your own, foxhole, if you will. And, even from the transportation system in Japan, my mom came to visit. In her head, she didn't know what to think about. But when she got there, she was like, oh my God, you can get on a train, you can just travel here, you can walk everywhere. She was amazed. And the transportation system there is amazing. I never had to drive except to and from work. I literally took public transportation when I was not at work because it was so easy. You can ride your bike everywhere, park it on the street. I mean, so it just gave me an appreciation to know that how I grew up and what I only saw in my nucleus and my one bubble doesn't exist like that. It's so different, and the world is big and it's very different. And people are all different, but still similar in so many other ways.
I think that when you don't speak the language in a country, it can be isolating, but you seem to be really outgoing. So I think you can compensate a lot with your personality. And then the other thing that happens a lot is that you become part of the expat community, and that becomes your second home. Is that how do you deal with that, like the isolation of not speaking the language and the expat community?
Yeah, so funny. I actually never immersed in any of the expat or immigrant communities. I literally made a point to make friends and stay immersed in the culture. So all my friends, if we were not colleagues in the military, they were Japanese. All my friends in Korea, they were Korean. Here in Kenya, they're Kenyan. And so everywhere I go, I tend to immerse myself all the way in the culture down to having the friendships. And so I never felt isolated. And I think, as you mentioned, because of my personality, people welcome me. And so they become my extended family. And I'm never homesick. I'm usually telling, my recruiter, not recruiter, but our consultant, hey, anytime you get an overseas assignment, tag me in. I want that, which is why I've been able to have so many overseas assignments, because I don't ever get homesick, because it's literally me enjoying the culture and living the culture every day.
That's really interesting. Andrea, do you want to give it another go?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yay!
I wanted to say Jambo because I know that that's hello in Swahili.
It is.
And I just wanted to say I'm just in such awe of your adventurous and loving lifestyle, how you just love people and differences and different cultures. And I've just been really impressed with your story. One thing to touch on that and related to interacting with people, I know your job, you mentioned a lot about testing methods and testing different types of pesticides and working with resistance and insects. But do you also have like sort of an outreach component to your work? And if so, like what's it like interacting with native citizens, and how do they, and are they receptive to some of the knowledge that you share?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically I do enjoy outreach. Here, I've only been able to do it once at one of the international schools. Some of my other assignments, I would get invited to talk to younger kids, kindergartners or elementary age kids, or whenever they would have career day, I would go. And this has been whether I was in the US or overseas. And so having that community outreach, I think, was a leg into a lot of the communities. I have participated in humanitarian missions where we had to be invited in by the state officials to help establish a pest program within their communities. Very receptive. One country that stands out the most is also the Marshall Islands. I know I mentioned it in my talk, but one of the other opportunities where I'm doing community outreach is I'm going literally door to door teaching the community about mosquito larvae. And it's called Nam Ning Ning in Marshallese. So I learned, okay, how do I say mosquito babies? Because I want to make it as simple as possible so that they understand this relationship. because they have barrels of water and they use it to, clean their food or wash their clothes or whatever they need it for. So you're not going to ask them to dump out their barrels of water. So how can we help the communities put nets over it? Or if they see non-ming-mings, mosquito babies, pull them out, of course, if they don't die and things of that nature. And so I found that being able to go into the community was way more impactful because I realized, as I mentioned earlier, people don't know what they don't know. And so if you can teach the community just even basic things of, changing the habitat, modifying it a little bit, pouring out water, just these basic things, whether it's a younger person, they'll go home and teach their parents. Whether it's a person that's always at home, they'll remember, hey, when I'm doing my yard chores to whatever capacity that is, oh, if I see standing water, I see mosquito larvae. They now put the two and two together that this will then turn into an adult, which will then bite me to cause harm. And so I did a lot of community outreach, especially in Asia. As I mentioned here, I was able to do a talk with one of the international schools. This was right before COVID happened. And I got, a lot of the teachers wanted me to come back and have a bud camp where I can take them out and teach them how to collect and show them beneficial, even though I brought specimens, but to see it in action, collect beneficial or show them harmful insects. But we never had an opportunity to do it due to COVID. And so now we're, really trying to integrate again. And I haven't been asked to come back because schools just resumed actually 3 weeks ago here in Kenya for the international students that's part of the US community. And so getting into the communities is way more, I won't say it's way more fun. It's just, it takes me outside of the walls of the military, of our installation, because as you know, the insects are just not on our installation. They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous. They're within the communities. So if you have that connection with a vector control company or an abatement company or whatever it is, those collaborations can then push the message further. And then if they are working on something, you now have that relationship where you get the information. And so you just, you help each other back and forth. They become a little bit of a sentinel for you. You become a little bit of a sentinel for them. And the relationships, I think, are needed because we only get to see things that's on the installation unless we're traveling into some of these countries.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah, and science communication is so important. I think that's so great. Jen, do you want to do the next question?
Yeah, I think that's really amazing that you can really directly see the impact within the community that you're in by what you're doing. Going back to your love for travel, I was kind of wondering, do you have any new hobbies that you picked up or enjoy doing now that you've traveled all around the world? I know you're talking a lot about food and how you like different foods. Have you learned how to cook new dishes or anything like that?
Surprisingly, I actually cooked a type of Thai curry dish today. One of my counterparts is at one of our research labs in Thailand, and I love Penang curry. And so she sent me like a goodie box, and I tried it today for the first time. I am not big into cooking because I love to eat. I'm on the receiving end of it, but I will try. But literally for hobbies, hiking. So whenever I'm in a different country, I love the outdoors. So I'll be hiking Mount Kenya in 2 weeks. I'm taking 7 days to summit Mount Kenya. And so anytime I'm at a different, wherever I am, I always try to find a small hill and hike. So hiking is my thing. I've taken up snowboarding and skiing. I learned how to ski in Japan and I learned how to snowboard in Korea. So that's become a thing. And so, which I could have done in the US, but for some reason it was more fun to do it in these other countries, right? But as you mentioned, being a foodie, that's probably my main hobby, tasting different cuisines, street trucks, whatever the case is. I've even gotten E. coli since I've been here because I love food so much, so, but I think so that's probably my biggest hobby, to make sure that I try every local dish, every country I go to. And of course, hiking just to see the cultural aspects of the country and to learn a little bit more about their nature impact and what bugs they have. And of course, I'm collecting things safely and within, natural resources guidelines. I would like to state that. But but yeah, no. So I would probably say those are my hobbies at this point.
What's been your favorite dish, food dish? Can you pick one?
I can't.
No.
I can't. I am greedy. I am greedy.
They all sound
No.
good.
Absolutely.
You sounded like you were pretty smitten with the sushi.
And sushi is my first love because I love seafood. And so I guess if I had to pick anything that's seafood based, so regardless to where it's made, seafood is my number one love. And then everything else, because I don't really eat a lot of pork. I don't really eat a lot of beef these days. I try to do poultry every now and then. So if I had to pick a dish, anything made with seafood, that would be a winner for me.
Cool.
Sushi is very good.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
It's funny that you're saying seafood coming from Gary, Indiana.
I know. Lake food there, bass and lake perch and
Yeah.
everything. So I used to call things water food, and people always stared at me funny. And so seafood seemed to be the terminology that everyone understood, but I used to call it water food actually.
I want to be conscious of your time, so I think we're gonna have one more question, Olivia. If you want to go ahead with our last question for Jaree.
Yeah, my question is just, you've been all over the world. Is there somewhere else, another country that you would like to visit or live in the future?
So I've been to 6 of the 7 continents. I have not been to Antarctica yet. And so that is on my bucket list to get to my 7th continent, just to check that. But in terms of living somewhere, I'm a water person. So if I could be on some body of water with sand and blue water, gray water, just some type of water, because I love water. I think coming from being on the Great Lakes, but I don't have a destination just yet. I'm still exploring. I have toyed with the idea of a vacation house in the Caribbean. I've even thought about a vacation house here on the coast of Kenya because I've been traveling there a lot on my leave days, and it's amazing. The Indian Ocean, all the seafood, the people. I mean, it's just amazing. And so that would probably be the top umbrella. Find a place on some body of water, where to be determined.
So
They all sound amazing.
yeah, do you ever want to move back to the US, you think?
I have a huge family. That's one thing I didn't talk about. My family is huge. My immediate family is small. My mom has 2 sisters, and then just within the grandkids, it's only 7 of us, and then 2 great grandkids. But my extended family is ginormous. 5 sisters married 5 brothers, and we have a family reunion every year. We've been doing it since 1979, and we take over hotels, so it's huge. So because I'm so connected to family, it makes it hard to just fully separate. And that's where having the vacation home idea comes into play, where I can go and then come back. But I think just my connection to my family won't let me just fully leave America, but maybe do 6 months in America, 6 months somewhere else, when that retirement time comes.
Cool. So Jaree, do you want to share any social media accounts that you have where people can follow you on your adventures? It sounds like you probably have like amazing photos from all these different places and
I
vacations.
do. Yes, absolutely. And so my Twitter handle is All I Know Are Bugs. And that's also and that's also my Instagram handle as well. All I Know Are Bugs.
All right, thanks. We'll put that in the show notes. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and taking the time to be on the podcast. And thanks
Absolutely.
everyone for listening to this episode. And we will see you in the next podcast episode. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye.